Well, good morning, everybody, and Clint Baker. So glad to have you with us
Thank you.
today.
Glad to be here.
So, artist in residence, what does that mean? And first term elder, you got all kinds of hats you're wearing.
Uh, it's a lot to live up to, artist in resident and elder, but I love it. It's awesome. I at first rejected the artist in resident because it felt like I was being fake, but I totally accept it.
Yeah,
Yes, it's great.
it's a real thing.
I know it. I know it is. I feel like it's weird when somebody puts the bar in a title for you
Yeah.
because then you have to live up to it.
Well, literally, all you have to do is dwell among us and be yourself.
Okay,
So
I
there
can
you
do
go.
that.
And most
Even with
people don't get
cameras
a
on,
title
I
for
can do
that,
that. That's true.
but you do.
Okay, I'll do it.
That's pretty great. So, how often do you do projects for us at St. Patrick, and when did that start?
We've been doing projects. I've been doing projects for since gosh, I don't know. Has it been like at least a couple of years, right?
Yeah, almost four, I think.
Oh wow. Okay, more than two. And we do. I guess it's like one every sermon.
Yeah,
now.
pretty much.
We had some projects, but I couldn't keep up.
We just throw whatever we can at you,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and just hope you don't learn that magic word no.
Yes. No, I'm bad at saying no. You can ask my wife.
Yeah. So your very first project for us was the setting the table artwork, which was the fundraiser for our new building, which is now built.
Right.
And that piece stands in that building over the coffee bar,
Yeah.
which is pretty cool.
Yeah,
What was
it's
your
awesome.
favorite thing about doing that piece?
I mean, just the first time, the first date of being like, oh, I get to do my thing, and for people that I'm just learning to know and just knowing, and that's always exciting.
Yeah.
It's always really cool. But I mean, I think it's a really cool way to meditate on what is being said. It really gets in deeper. This is why I like to do the sermon series, because you don't if you're reading, like if I'm reading First Peter, I'm reading it to understand it, but I'm not reading it to visualize it. So if I'm reading it to understand it and then I'm reading it to visualize it, it goes in another level. I'm sure it's like if I'm teaching it, it's going to go in another level.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's the same kind of thing. So anything that comes along, it's like, hey, here's the concept. I think that's kind of why I just a little bit of research before any project, is you get to know it in a different way that you normally wouldn't have.
Yeah.
Like driving through a neighborhood versus walking through a neighborhood.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like, you
absolutely.
just see it totally different.
Totally different.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can't take in as much of it, which means it's a little less consumeristic.
Yes.
You're actually in it.
You're in. Yeah, that's right. You're in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're affected by all the things around you,
Yeah.
not enclosed in a glass and metal box driving through.
Right.
Yeah.
So speaking of First Peter and neighborhoods,
Yep.
we're doing this new series called The Art of Neighboring.
Yeah.
How did that strike you when we first gave you that assignment?
Just that, that's so much of what we are at the very roots. And has made such a big, just communities has made such a big difference in our life that, it was just exciting to go, okay, here, this is speaking right to the point. Especially now, I think it's really important with all the separation and everything that we're going through. So that was the first thing I thought. But visually, I didn't really have any thoughts about it until we started talking about it. Yeah.
Can you show me some of the early drafts of
Sure.
things that you were thinking of, and let's kind of talk through that?
You bet. Well, the first draft that I was thinking about was, and this is kind of where my mind goes. I sort of live in in my mind in a tall building in New York in 1932 for some reason. So this is what I would draw first. And so this idea of being together, each window is a different neighbor, and there's one neighbor that's just living their life, and there's a frame around this window that is just sort of, the idea would be that they were not doing this to appear holy, but this was just sort of the result of the magneticness of the gospel in their life is attractive and magnetic to people. Even people who reject it, it's still magnetic to. So that was the idea there.
Yeah.
This was
That's literally magnetic now.
yes, Yes, this is kind of like the comic version of, or the cartoon version of understanding the idea, where you sort of have this person who has people stuck to them, and one person is shaking a hand. Oh, this is nice to meet you. And this other person is attracted to, but is not, is acting out of whatever, jealousy or anger or whatever. And
Yeah.
this fella here, he doesn't really know what to say, not prepared, really, to just sort of taken by surprise by it, which is how I feel when,
Yeah.
a lot of times.
So he hasn't quite gotten to chapter 3 in First Peter yet. He doesn't know that he's supposed to be prepared to have an answer for this magnetic hope that he's got.
No, he's
But
not
people
ready.
are asking the questions, and then there are people like this fella down on the bottom right who maybe is attracted but also repelled in a way. He's attracted, but his soul is repelled, and
Yes.
so he's trying to act out,
Yeah.
which Peter also talks about, and that sometimes we end up suffering for doing good.
Yes. Yeah. That's right.
That's great. I love it.
And this was, I'll go to, this one was another idea with a school of fish that are really diverse. They don't normally school together like this, but it's the gospel that brings them together. And they're following this art of neighboring in water. Maybe there's a little bit of a baptism connection there. I didn't realize until later. And down here you have these fish that are really, they're not diverse at all. They're just the same, and they're petty and they're small, and they're just kind of trying to pull this apart. And so here we have this type is sort of this neighboring, the art of neighboring, and it's being, in some ways, it's having to go through a trial. It's being torn apart, yet it's still there, and these fish are a witness to that trial. All right, so then the other one was what we talked about yesterday in text. We went back and forth, and this one I knew. This is where I started. I actually started drawing this one yesterday because you had mentioned this row of houses, and then you had mentioned a river in text, and then we talked about kind of combining these two together. And when you were texting me, this is kind of what I saw, and started sketching it last night. And then those other ideas that I showed you, those actually came after this one. And I really started to fall in love with some of these other ones, especially the fish. But then today I went back and worked on this one some more to clean it up, and I realized it sort of became my favorite. And I think I knew, I was like, yeah, this is the one. I think Josh is going to like this one the best. And
I do. I'm kind of predictable in that.
No, I mean, what's funny is that I actually like this one a lot, and I wanted to make you like this one. I wanted to make this work, but then when I cleaned this up, I was like, this just works better. So we have these houses that are these suburban houses. They're all the same, and yet one is very, very, very different. But it's sort of like we're dealing with more than just we're dealing with two different realms, but it's the same. It's not this idea that one is just purely spiritual and the other one is not physically present. This one house is physically present, and it has this sort of palatial, or very palatial spirit, and I'm not trying to divide the two, but that is kind of the idea. So you have to correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like I'm skirting off into Gnosticism here, but I don't mean to, because these houses are, while they're the same, they're different. And I think that's the key. And that from this house, and even though you might not be able to see it in the real world, there's a river flowing out of this house and feeding the other houses and creating a current that will pull these houses in. And to me, it kind of feels like our motives. I mean, on the outside, we can be doing something that looks really normal, and it's really this beautiful, holy thing, or we can be doing something that looks really holy, and it's really this horrific thing that we're motivated to do. And I think this is kind of like we're seeing this is
the reality.
Yeah, this is the reality. That's it. This is the whole reality.
I also love the idea that, like, I mean, there's two kingdoms kind of at play here, and we even talked about instead of using the kind of cathedral thing, to maybe use more like a St. Peter's Basilica,
Yeah.
with the word basilica coming from the Greek, that means kingdom, so that kind of gets at the two kingdoms as well. And then it's St. Peter's, and this is First Peter. But I love the idea that the blue world and the red world are overlapping and interlocking, and there are things that are going on here between these two. And it really does give the picture from Ezekiel, and we see it a lot in Revelation. This idea that from the temple goes this river, and that it is a blessing to the world. That it actually makes brackish or salty water run fresh, so that there can be life and all of that. It's really kind of this beautiful image. That's where the trees grow, and then their leaves are for the healing of the nations. Like, all of that happens from this living water that flows from the temple, which is, Jesus says that about himself in John, 6 and 7, especially 7, where he talks about, I'm the water. You get that, right? Even John 4, right? When he's talking to the Samaritan woman, I'm the water
that you drink.
Yeah, you need that.
Yeah.
And so the way that we live our lives in our neighborhoods produces this living water that just sort of flows out of the threshold and into the neighborhood. And Peter says we're the temple. And so it's kind of a both and that are going on here, which I just think is fantastic. This piece captures that sort of essential quality of this book, like the others. The others really get at a single element really well. This one, I think, is just quintessentially First Peter, which I love.
Okay. Yeah. In our neighborhoods of, and I'm thinking about the outline that you showed me, neighborhoods of work, neighborhoods of our actual neighborhood. There are multiple neighborhoods. There's multiple neighboring.
And they're concentric. Like, they start, centrally, and they kind of work their way out.
Yeah.
It's what's happening in your home, and it's how you're dealing with your neighbors, and it's how you're interacting with your boss or your employees, and your government. Like, it's all of those things, and Peter addresses those.
Yeah, it is.
So I love this work. I'm really excited about it. I'm really excited for the people who are watching this right now, because unlike me, I have to wait a couple of days to see the final product. They're going to see it right. Gorgeous. So grateful for Clint as a friend and a coworker. That was a lot of fun for me, and I hope that you enjoyed diving in behind the music, as it were, into our creative process for series artwork. As we were working on it this week, and probably just because I've been dwelling on these themes, an otherwise familiar verse in the Soul Room readings really just kind of smacked me in the face. It was chapter 11 of Hebrews. The author highlights a few of those in the book of Genesis who trusted in God and were blessed with many gifts, including their land and homes and families. And yet he reminds us in verse 13, these all died in faith, having not received the things promised, but having seen them and greeted them from afar, and having acknowledged that they were strangers and exiles on the earth. So this morning in worship, as we kick off our Art of Neighboring series, Jim is going to be preaching on the first couple of verses in Peter, where the disciple addresses believers as elect exiles. Those two words make huge claims on our everyday lives that are every bit as radical and countercultural today as they were 20 centuries ago, when the apostles used those words to shape the imagination of their hearers and to take them back to their identity as the new and true Israel, and yet also still in exile, still awaiting the advent of the Messiah. But we've been put where we are for a divine reason, and wherever that place is can never claim our ultimate loyalty. So what in the world is God up to in my neighborhood, and what role am I supposed to play in that? I hope that the artwork that we see each week in this series will help you meditate on how your own lives as neighbors can be what Clint called a palatial spirit. I loved that word picture. We may look the same as our neighbors, but we are called to have a palatial spirit that then breathes life into the neighborhood that we live in. How is it that recognizing we've not yet arrived actually makes us more present and glorious where we are on the way? That is the heart and soul of this series. Another thing that is sure to be helpful to you are the Bible Project videos, which you can find in the links for the show notes below. Today's featured video on exile will really flesh out how controversial that claim is. And I've also included the overview on 1 Peter. If you missed it last week, it is really helpful. Each of those is only a few minutes long and very much worth your time. I hope to see you soon.